has started right now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the focus track 1 of the European Data Spaces session. We're going to talk about the reality of shaping data sharing policies and strategies. And I think we should give a couple of minutes to everybody to join. We have our speakers and panelists already connected. We have Cristina Ollón from Grupo Esprit, the Innovation and Development Agency for the Basque government. We have Jana Sinipuro from Citra, project manager and leader of a very interesting session, initiative on health data. We have Jan Jost Julens, director at Blockchain, working very closely with the Port of Rotterdam. We have Finbar Murphy, who is the CEO and founder of a really interesting data sharing technology startup and has worked very closely with a ministry in the UK, setting up their data sharing strategy. And finally, we have Andrew Collins, who is advisor to Smart Dubai, a global reference for data sharing sandbox setting. So this is it from now. I think we need a couple more minutes to get everybody to join. We have 30 participants and counting, so we're going to wait a little bit more. Yeah. And yeah, keep tuned.
I think you can start. It's now web streamed on Vuva, so people should be able to see us already.
Okay, so we are starting in Vuva now, right?
Yeah, everything is set up. So when you want to start, you can start.
Okay, is that I see people joining, and yeah, just to repeat again the introduction. Tomo, you can say something?
Yeah, I can say something. Something.
Something.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to start officially this session. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss the practical aspects of data sharing. We have a stellar panel here with us. We have 5 people that are doing data sharing in different parts of the world, mainly in Europe. And we have 2 chairs, Tomo Tuika from VTT and myself, that are working on this aspect from the Big Data Value Association. We'll tell you a little bit more later. We wanted to talk about the good, the bad and the ugly of data sharing, because very often we find ourselves with policies more or less, I'm going to say dictated, but put in front of us from policymakers at the European level. And then it's down to the member states and it's down to the regions to actually put them in context and make them a reality. And that happens not only in Europe, but in other parts of the world, as we will see during the discussion. We wanted to bring you a few examples of companies, organizations, key stakeholders and public authorities we have come across. We like what they do. We think that they have an approach that many people in the audience can take stock of and can learn and can try to say, take as an example, benchmark themselves, or even find something new. We hope this session today is about that. It's about finding new stuff, understanding what is being done, and hopefully inspiring you to do something in a direction that it's good. Yeah. Without further ado, I'm going to start telling you off some housekeeping rules. You are muted anyway, but don't try to set up your microphone on. Only the speakers have microphones on during this session. Please do not use the Zoom chat to ask questions. Connect through Wova. You can do it either through your web browser or through the app. Yeah, it works well. And I have to tell you all that this is being recorded. It will be made available in the EBDVA social media channels. So those are the rules for all of us today. We want to thank all the sponsors for the Big Data Value, from the Big Data Value Association and associated partners that have made the EBDVF 2020 a reality. It is a great help that these companies want to support all things data and AI and bring them to the community for free. This is the group of people that are going to be with you for the next hour and a half, hopefully to have a good and interesting discussion. Both Tuomo and myself have been working very closely with Simon Skerry from Fraunhofer on the data sharing task force. And we launched 2 days ago, just the very beginning of the EBDVF 2020, the version 2 of the paper on data sharing, where we discuss the European governed data spaces. Tuomo is going to say a few words about that later on. And we have managed to arrange a really nice group of people with practical experience in the how to take policies into realities and how to work with public authorities to actually help them on the digital transformation. And when I say digital transformation, I mean absorbing and understanding the technologies that are key for data sharing into their cultures, into their practices, into their organizations, and obviously with their people. Yeah. Without further ado, I give the floor to my colleague Tuomo, who will be talking about this lovely data wheel. Please, Tuomo.
Very good. Thank you very much, and thank you for the introduction, Irene. So as already mentioned, the BDVA has published a new white paper called Towards European Governed Data Space. And in the paper, the European governed means that data sharing reflects and respects the European ethical values and principles, meaning openness, democracy, privacy protection, fair and equal opportunities. And it is for like a call to us all. It's because it emphasizes that the strategic and timely steering of activities towards data sharing spaces can really position Europe as a pioneer globally for data sharing innovation. So we also asked the panelists to take a look and reflect on the data sharing value wheel in the picture, if it is possible in their case. So maybe we hear some opinions on that. So in the picture, you can see that the paper envisions core pillars and principles of the European governed data sharing space, and which then generates value for all sectors of society. So the success of this widespread data sharing activities revolves around the central key concept of trust. And the pillars are here: data, governance, people, organizations, and technology. For data, free movement, interoperability, and valuation of data are important principles. Then for governance, openness, democracy, and compliance, and having common European values, guidelines, and rules are important. And for people, individual privacy, fair use of data, and skills need to be addressed. And organizations need to think their business models. The transformation is big, very big in that sense. And think about the value flows and data culture they have. And of course, technology, we need to have the relevant technology behind trustworthy data access and algorithms as well as the experimentation and standardization. So we did not only settle to present just describing the concepts, but also through requirements analysis came into call for actions. And if you think of actions, it is very useful to see a roadmap and think where in time the actions should happen. And now, Irene, if you would change the slide for the next one. So this figure here shows a suggested time frame for implementing the recommended actions over the next decade. And the y-axis illustrates the relative effort distribution between the phases identified here. And convergence on the left-hand side means that we bring together national and regional efforts in order to have all the European players in the same direction. That can happen through coordination actions, identifying and conforming to common building blocks, and of course we should develop new European-wide skills and expertise. So when convergence is at a reasonable level, deployment can start, and that can happen or be held through funding or the development rules and guidelines, research and innovation actions, and developing EU-wide data governance practices. So it is necessary also to do standardization of common building blocks. On the up you see that actions there. So methods, common building blocks, methods, and even best practices, and then to see that sufficient conditions enable widespread adherence to standards. Then what comes to experimentation actions like investing in piloting to test drive identified data sharing use cases in regional European-wide scenarios, engage with the major initiatives. That is very important. Let's say digital innovation hubs to name one, and setting up European regulatory sandboxes for trusted data sharing and safe exploration of risks. In parallel to above actions, we need greater awareness actions. That could be, for example, launching campaign targeted at influencing organizations, to see how they can improve data strategies and their life cycles. So that presentation very quickly now lists and provides some basis for discussion and actions. And if that is a hook for this discussion, and the idea is of course to make Europe successful in data economy eventually. And I think that it was my 5 minutes, and from now on I think we will do so that Irene leads the conversation here, and I will follow the WOWA Q&A, and if there is any questions to raise or WOWA chat in fact. So if there is any questions from the audience.
Thank you so much, Tuomo. That's fantastic. It's great to see you presenting the work that we've been doing with the community for the last 2 years. This has been a really interesting effort, bringing not only the Big Data Value Association community together to put their thoughts around data sharing from a technology point of view, from a business point of view, from what type of opportunities for companies are out there and for individuals. But it's also that how have we managed to rally everybody, and I say this with humbleness but pride as well, because what we had a very clear idea was we wanted to end the paper with a call to action. Yeah, and the same way that we wanted to put this panel together to talk about what it needs to be done and how we actually need to act to be able to have those data sharing spaces open for all, yeah, and be a tool for new opportunities, economic growth, but also social growth and social equality. Yeah. Our speakers are going to talk about different aspects of this. We're going to start with Cristina Ollón. She's the Director of Technology, Innovation and Sustainability at the SPRI. SPRI is the Basque Government Economic Development and Sustainability Agency, and she has been working throughout her career in developing strategic initiatives that cater for the Basque region and its industry. She's a champion of women in tech, and she is an absolute pleasure to work with. I've known her for a few years. Today, she's going to tell us how her plans are materializing around this idea of building cyber-secure data spaces for the Basque industry. Cristina, please, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Irene. Thank you, Tuomo, and thank you to the organizers of this relevant event for fostering data economy in Europe. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you the approach that we are developing here in the Basque region around these concepts of data trust. And we started like 4 years ago building what we at that time named a connected network of assets in our region as an initiative of our regional innovation strategy, our RIS3 strategy, trying to connect different equipment and the capabilities that we have to support companies in the Basque Country, mostly SMEs, to incorporate at that time digital technologies and manufacturing related technologies. We created this network of with the different technology agents in our region with that approach, and at that time also European Commission started to develop the concept of the digital innovation hubs as drivers for digitalization in the different regions around Europe. So we understood that this was a good opportunity to put a name connected to the rest of the world to our initiative, and we started to think about how to organize this Basque Digital Innovation Hub. So from this approach that was very much related towards technology, we connected organizations around a complex governance, because all these organizations are colleagues, but also competitors in many cases. And regarding this data wheel that Tuomo presented to us, I would say that, as I said, we started with some of the pieces of this data wheel organizing a technology-oriented activity with some organizations in our ecosystem around this concept of accelerating technology incorporation in our companies. Next slide, please. In this, again, we understand, thanks to the European Commission initiative to make these initiatives, these digital innovation hubs, be part of a broader initiative with the European Digital Innovation Hub, and pushed by this idea of the Commission, pushed in a positive way, of course, we realized that the network that we have created around the concept of test before invest could be very well complemented with different initiatives, different stakeholders in our region. So we are now in the process of creating this bigger ecosystem around the Basque Digital Innovation Hub, and this starts to have it needs again the next part of the data wheel, that is people. So around this there are organizations, but the real difficult activity here is to engage people around this this initiative. And then we come to data, because as I said, we started to build this initiative as a way of fostering the incorporation of digital technologies 4 years ago. Again, pushed in a positive way from the European Commission initiative towards this European Digital Innovation Hub, we realized that a good point or an added value to our community, to our ecosystem, from this slide of connecting people and organizations, we really would like to, next slide please, Irene. We really would like to use this initiative around this equipment where companies can test before invest, this ecosystem where there is a possibility of education in these technology oriented activities and this ecosystem where you can work or network with different agents. We are now in the process of specializing our initiative and focus on the development and implementation of cybersecure data spaces that allow the development and applications of safe and reliable artificial intelligence solutions. Again, we are not, the main focus of our initiative is to give companies in the Basque Country and hopefully in other parts of Spain and hopefully also in other parts of Europe with an infrastructure open to them to experiment with digital technologies. This experimentation, we understand that can give us a very good potential to develop data-oriented activities. And we would like to offer all these companies a data-based platform with the necessary infrastructure to develop and test these solutions. We also would like to provide other digital innovation hubs in Europe with an agile and secure infrastructure that facilitates the development of new manufacturing products and services linked to our activity, linked to our ecosystem, linked to the smart specialization strategy in the Basque Country. I see Irene now in the screen, so I think it's time to close my speech, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity of the later discussion to keep on talking about this. Thank you very much, Irene.
Thank you, Cristina. This was very interesting. I mean, here we see the example and how a region has taken very seriously how to help their industry go forward and adopt digital technologies and tools, and how they are thinking ahead on how to bring the basics of the building a data economy through these cybersecurity data spaces for AI. We will talk about that more later because Cristina has a lot to say. But what I heard was people, and I love that, you know, engaging people. People are really at the core of this type of initiatives. And there is this push of policies that are global in how digital needs to be understood, and then how to bring them to reality, to the floor or to the ground, and involve the key stakeholders in the ground. And then trust. Yeah, the last word of her presentation was precisely about trust. That the BDIH builds trust, digital trust, for Europe's industry. And what does that mean? We will explore this later. Now we have the pleasure of counting with Jana Sinipuro, who is a project director in Citra, and she's going to talk to us about her work around the promise of a fair data economy. I really like the way Jana portrays herself. She is on a mission to promote a human-driven data economy. That is a big ambition, and she considers herself a team player, and I love that. I consider myself a team player, so Jana, this is great. Her work in Citra, which is the Finnish Innovation Fund, deals with fair data sharing, but she's also an expert on health data, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the initiative. Jana, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Irene, for a very nice introduction. Just briefly, before I go to this data sharing initiatives we are doing, a couple of words about the FinData, this secondary use of healthcare, social and healthcare data. Finland was initiating a new legislation for streamlining research practices for the safe use of healthcare data in 2018. So in fact, Citra was preparing the operating model for the secure use of healthcare data, doing plans for digital health hub in 2016, 2018, and now we have a FinData, which is a national centralized permit authority taking care of giving permits for research and innovation activities for the use of big data research from Finland, and also securing the safe data handling environment. But we all know that it's not really enough in the future to rely only on registered data or government authorities data or data coming from the authorities. So inspired by the GDPR in 2018 and this idea of consent-based data sharing, we initiated our project called Fair Data Economy or Human-Driven Data Economy, etc. And that's very much built on the ideas that we were creating during the Finnish EU presidency together with the Ministry for the Human-Driven European Model of Data Economy, focusing on the individuals and fairness and those digital rights defined based on European values, not like company-driven models or platform-driven models, not like state-driven models like Chinese model for data economy. And we started from quite humble technical approach, and then suddenly we realized that there's a very good momentum to redefine the fundamentals for the data economy. So, and enriching the traditional data sources, thinking about healthcare data, it's also about your nutrition data, it's your mobility data, it's your lifestyle data that benefits the research and innovations. But let's go further, what we are, because I really like this wheel of value wheel you were presenting. And when I think about what we've been doing in the last 2 years, etc., basically our work is focused on think part, do, and networking part. So we do lots of foresight activities as a think tank. So research, surveys, studies on how the data is being used, how personal data is being used by big platform giants in real world, how we should design the industry, what we can learn from telco and finance sector during the past 40 years of history, how those industries have developed compared to the data economy. We've done lots of surveys about company attitudes for data sharing, how competent companies and SMEs are taking their role as ecosystem orchestrators needed for these trustworthy ecosystems to exist. So as you can see here, we think that it's very important to start with the people and also training of SMEs and companies. We have our own SME development program focusing on building skills for data-driven service creation. And let's hope that there will be some support for importing that into the broader European setting as well. So skills of the organization, individual skills, those are very important. I think we need to have more coordinated approach across Europe to build those skills. And then technologies. It's very hard to illustrate what data sharing enables. So we need practical use cases. So that's why with a couple of innovative companies, we developed a technology testbed. So European data economy testbed that will be open for all to innovate and use for data-driven service development later next year, in March next year. And it was like a crazy idea that started from drafting a blueprint on how to create a system, how to create tools needed for this consent-based data sharing. And there's a soft standardization. We went through the SEN process for identity, consent, and logging of this data sharing. And that's important part, creating transparency on what happens on your data and having clear standards. But also those business rules. I think that's needed. We talk a lot about governance, and it starts with the transparency, but also not being necessary. If you talk about multi-party data sharing, there needs to be common and agreed rules, how to start building those data sharing networks. So we need to have those commonly defined rule books for data sharing. And there's some work done on the rule book templates where we give control questions for ethical questions, technical criteria, data-related topics, and of course, incentives. And it's, if you take a next slide, this is a huge thing to do, but I think there's this need for sustainability, a new race for sustainability. So one of the very important things we've been doing while wanting to promote and help those companies that exceed the demands set for them by the GDPR, this responsible data usage framework. So we work together with Gartner on maturity models, what characterize on fair and fair data sharing ecosystems. And we will launch those later this year, those criteria. That's the first attempt to define what it's meant by the fairness and what's needed for fair data sharing. But here are some of the first characteristics we defined together with our partners. A company that's data responsible should have very strong data strategies, and also the company should have done analysis on threats and possibilities with data. And then it should be in the company genes, this idea of creating value with the aid of data. Gartner talks a lot about data-driven decision-making and planning for the future, agile planning for the future. Transparency, that's a kind of minimum criteria about the collection and management of data that should be like in evidence for everyone wanting to brand themselves as a fair company. Then these other criteria relate very much on the role and this user-driven rights. The company should exceed statutory requirements. It's okay. It should be built into the privacy and things needed, right to be forgotten by the GDPR. If you think about personal services, but those companies that act on beyond that should be rewarded with this branding of European, made in Europe style services. So that's one of the ideas what we are currently working on, and we hope to have much more companies to join us on the sustainable data sharing business. And that's it. You don't need to be angry.
No, I'm not. Thank you so much. Thank you, Gianna. Perfect timing. Absolutely, you guys have been amazing. It's what I hear. It's very interesting. I mean, you are putting. You are looking after your SMEs. You believe that digital skills are essential to bring them into this new data economy, this human-centered, fair data economy. And I really like the practical approach. It's like we need to test those technologies. When I see this slide, when I see these points, I couldn't agree more with each of those points. But one thing is to define what is needed, and then how do you bring technology to actually match these requirements? And you have to start with this to be able to go to the next level. I really enjoyed, and I think in the conversation later we're gonna discuss this more, because these are very relevant points. I hope everybody enjoyed this presentation as well. Get ready for the next one. Our next speaker is Jan-Joost Julens. He is director of Block Lab, and he has been working on innovation and strategy at all levels, from board to street level. I wonder if you're an activist on sustainability and innovation. He is working at the minute with the Port of Rotterdam on developing a fair and open data market, which is what he's going to tell us today about. And Jan-Joost, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Irene. Nice to meet you, everybody. Jan-Joost Julens, indeed, I'm one of the two directors of Block Lab. We are a small company, 10 people, owned by the Port of Rotterdam. I'll dive into our portfolio in a minute. Bit of my background, I once studied technology management, so more deep into the impact and managing expectations around technology, also unexpected impact of technology, then deep into the engineering of things. Indeed, had many roles around innovation with startups, with investors, with policymakers, etc. Do some consultancy that touches these topics, and now helping out a government agency on their ethical data agenda, but mainly running Block Lab, which was also the, the reason to bring me in, right? A bit of background, the port of Rotterdam once used to be the largest port of the world, and then came Asia, so the new claim is smartest port of the world. It is a public limited company, and I think it's relevant as a background for what we're going to dive into, meaning it's government owned, but it's also an enterprise. So goes for profit, can do investments and participations, incorporations, etc. But with shareholders who hold a public agenda. So important challenge for the port is they did commit to the Paris Agreement, but they are also like the biggest carbon producer of the Netherlands, and it's a very large commodity port, which includes a lot of fossil-based fuels. So they, the port faces the challenge of staying globally competitive, and that's mostly a money thing, of course, while transitioning towards a way more sustainable way of running the energy system. BlockLab is one of their means to work in that direction. There are several, of course. We were established as what they called a Smart Industries Field Lab. So giving the state of technology, see what leaps you can make. Block comes from blockchain. That's the core of the technology developments we're in. We do touch AI, big data, and a lot of not so much buzzwords, but necessary technology to get solutions running. But the core of what we do is decentralized technology. And that means we take an economic view on data and on solutions. And I think that's makes sense given the port situation. It's also what you see happening in the realm of data. The economics behind it are quite important. We are an SME, so we can travel light, we can take risks. Our mission was go see what you can do. So we actually, to be honest, we do not start from European strategies or legislation or etc. We start from what can we do? Let's see where we bump our head. And of course, in some stage of experiments, you touch business reality and legal. So we're not stupid, but we do start with some adventure and risk taking. So the port, what you see here, where you see role and agenda, that's not their formal strategy, but that's the way we look at the port. And actually, we are now invited to upgrade this towards a strategy, but it's not that far yet, but we use this as our frame. The Port of Rotterdam is a landlord, and we think landlord in this age should include very good digital infrastructure, because that's part of the value chain now. So there's water, there's land, and there's data now. And in terms of security and optimal use of it, of sharing, etc., landlord should have a role there. Second, port is a service provider, all kinds of logistical services, more and more energy services. So that when you think digital, that means developing applications. And the port, being government owned, facilitating hundreds of companies there, is also an open market where you want fair rules, open access for everybody, etc., which means we are also working on ecosystem. So that's the background of the agenda we come from. And I was pressing my thank you, Irene. I tried to do this myself. When we the way we have translated that into portfolio is there are other projects, but these are some of the interesting projects we're in. We opened shop in end of 2017, so we've been on it for 3 years now. Started with 2.5 guy, so I think we are now actually up and running. In the realm of digital infrastructure, a few things we are working on and proud of our trade twin, which is, let's say, a digital notary function that contributes to interoperability of platforms. So one of the first POCs with this was a ship coming from Korea to Rotterdam, and all paperwork throughout all systems, so the Korean systems, the Dutch systems, anything in between, being validated without third parties, but by a digital notary. We are now further developing that towards standard tooling in the port. Second one is we're working on the electronic bill of lading. We do that with the Dutch government, with the Port of Rotterdam, of course, with Singapore Port Authority, plus a digital agency from Singapore. And it's technology-wise, it's there's a piece of paper that you need to hold in your hand to claim you own the lading of a ship, and that can be done digital. But then we need to be really sure that your electronic bill of lading, so your data, are valid, and that's we're working on that. It's more legal work than digital work at the moment. And third, a multi-commodity energy platform. The digital infrastructure to trade energy across commodities, so power, hydrogen, heat, etc. On application level, so that's where we think more commercially and in serving parties with not in an infrastructural way, but let's say added value right at hand. Is distro energy. That's my biggest darling this year. It's a marketplace for peer-to-peer trading of electricity. We've developed that together with Standard & Poor's Global Platts. Made some headlines last month, including Bloomberg, when the pilot came out well. And we're now preparing that for commercialization. FatBlock is a VAT solution, so that's close to government policies, not the data sharing, but the financial part. An application to track VAT throughout a supply chain, which should save a lot of admin. And then on the ecosystem level, we do a lot, and that's we are in the lucky situation that we have 3 good universities nearby. We work with them, contribute to curriculum, have students in, which is also a way of scouting talent, of course, but also contributing to their learnings. We're in some research programs. The 2 tokens program we mentioned here, I put it in because that's EU funded. I thought, well, that's it's a nice moment to say thank you, which is a program about the road to tokenization, which is, let's not go too deep in that, but with blockchain, you can tokenize things that are also there in the physical world. It can be euros, can be shares, can be IP, can be etc. And that touches business logic, legalities, technology, etc. So this is a program in which public-private consortia support those kinds of use cases and help to develop a roadmap towards further use of that. Plus, we did quite some support of startups. So other companies with good ideas, we helped them towards funding and some knowledge. So that's the kind of portfolio we hold. We try to serve all 3. Thank you, Irene. And then maybe towards the discussions. So I can keep this short because I think this is part of what we are going to discuss today. The challenge when working with new technology that also brings in new paradigms is how to bring that in practice. On the left, you see, I think, the good. So we try to contribute to interoperability, to sovereignty. I think the key of economics is ownership. That's without ownership, economics would be a strange discipline. Who owns your data? How, if you own your data, how can you manage that? And if people work with it, how can they account for that? Validation of data, of course, and what we are very interested in, but that did not touch yet in our portfolio, is monetization. So we met Irene via the Ocean Protocol, and number 1 on my wish list of new projects to start is bringing them to the board, because I think the value of data could be explicit design of some of our solutions. And on the left side, you see the bad and the ugly. You decide what you call bad, what you call ugly. In the discussion, I'm very willing to give some examples of where we face trade-offs between the left and the right, or where the right slows down the great ideas on the left. That's the game we're in. I think it's enough for an introduction.
I think it's brilliant. I think it's brilliant, Jan-Jos, because you put the, the accent on the, actually, yes, data sharing, but what are the things that you guys are doing in practice? Yeah, you're an SME, but you're a laboratory for the Port of Rotterdam to bring these new technologies and testing them, yeah, and put them to the service of very practical aspects that the board needs, yeah. So I personally don't find any boring if you have to deal with financial issues, yeah, or you have to deal with some, logistics or whatever, because I think those are the things that are put all the theory, yeah, to test. And then you mentioned something very interesting. I wonder how much the people in the audience, the 70 people that we have now listening to us, hello, come back to us, please. But you said a couple of really interesting things there, at least from my point of view. You're using decentralized technology to help with these data sharing problems, because the port, as a global player, and a global player that has a globally distributed network of partners, other ports, authorities, et cetera, is looking at these technologies to solve some of those problems, and that the problems and the issues that you raise in this slide. Yeah, and when you talk about tokenization, I think it's also very interesting, because this is not a technical panel at all. Yeah, we wanted to put the emphasis on putting things into practice, but not necessarily talking about specific technological solutions. But tokenization, it's an interesting tool to be explored, to bring identity to digital, in the digital world, to physical objects. Yeah, and as such, it is a very, very powerful tool. We'll talk about the good and the bad and the ugly later on. Thank you very much, Jost. And now it's time to hear from Finbar. And Finbar Murphy, it's a serial entrepreneur, and he is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Modular Data that has a track record of building modular data sharing solutions for large companies. And he has been working on this space for over 20 years, and he's currently data strategy advisor, both for the public and private sector. So he's got a thing or two to say about how to do data sharing and what type of tools you need and what type of attitudes and what type of ecosystem. So Finbar, please, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Irene. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining. So I quite like that value wheel that we saw at the beginning as well. I'd like to focus, I think, on the organization and the people bit of that value wheel. So here I've got some of the barriers that we come up against when it comes to data sharing and being data driven as an organization. So how do you remediate data sharing? How do you remediate being data driven? So there's many steps that you need to take before we get to the good stuff of AI, of machine learning, of blockchain. There's steps that need to be taken to actually get the organization on the right path. I've taken here an example of the Department of Work and Pensions in the UK, which we've worked with for quite a bit. It's a very good example because it's a massive department. You can see down there on the at the side of the screen the different parts of the department. Now it's grown over time. It's an amalgamation of different departments over many years. So not only do you have an issue of data sharing internally, you also have, or externally, you have the issue of sharing data internally within the department because they have different infrastructures that don't communicate with each other. So to focus on some of the issues that you can see here, a lot of people will know these if you're on this call, and certainly the panel will, but organizations were creating a lot of siloed data. Because it's siloed, then it's basically you're creating these data prisons. So people can't get access to the data. So there's no value being gained from that data. The tooling to actually bring that together, not to mind this sort of the cultural transformation that goes on top, it's expensive. And to get access to that data, it becomes a really difficult job. So on top of that, you have people finding workarounds, and you create this data chaos essentially within an organization. So you end up with different interpretations of the same data sets, and the systems that you build to sort of solve some of these problems generally are built for the happy path of data. So in the UK, we've seen recently around the COVID testing, we've seen that systems fell over in track and trace because they forgot that there's a limit to the amount of rows in an Excel sheet. So all of these things, there's not lessons are not being learned from what's gone before. Irini, if you can go on to the next slide. So focusing on the Department of Work and Pensions, it's an interesting one to focus on from the approach about how do you get started? How do you get this thing moving? Because there was a number of different approaches taken based on the size of the organization. So one of the approaches is to formulate a data strategy based on policy, to bring in your data architects, to do your data modeling, to work on data co-location, and to plan that out and to almost treat it as a project. There was a lot of very large consultancies that you'll all be well aware of involved in this. That was initially set out as a 3-year project. It's now into its 5th or 6th year. It's debatable how much value it's actually delivered. But that is sort of one class that it's not just the public sector where you see this in the private sector quite a bit. People seem to lose their minds when it comes to data over the last few years. We've thrown away a lot of the thinking that we've had around operational systems, about learn and test, and we're not treating data as a product like we do with operational systems. So our approach when we were working with the DWP and with other partners and customers is to focus on a specific business problem. What are you actually trying to do with your data? If you're sharing your data, why? What is the reason? What's the tangible reason that the business or the organization wants to do that? Is it to improve the customer experience? Is it to look at employee well-being? Is it to reduce costs through supply chain or through the workflow? If you focus on something, then it's easier to package that up and deliver value early and often. So this goes back to what Jana was saying around some practical use cases. If you start with a practical use case, you can deliver a steel thread through that practical use case and deliver value, because the problem you have with the longer cases, things are going to take 3 to 5 years, is that there's no value being delivered through that. So the people that aren't bought into this, there's nothing for them to get attached to. And so there's no proof, there's no empirical evidence that what you're doing with data is actually going to be a success. Make sure that what you're delivering is easy to adapt and test. This is where you need to build on past experience. You need to build on data products that have been used before. 80% of the problems that we're trying to solve around data sharing are solved problems. Even though every organization is different, it's always going to be things around customer experience, around supply chain optimization. Another thing, play well with others. It's not a sort of a land grab. You're not building a data infrastructure that's just for your organization, especially if you have a large organization. It needs to be adaptable. It needs to be able to change as things change, because it's not a project. There's no end date to this. This thing changes as it goes. And you may have to, again, something that Jana was saying, you have to ensure the lineage of that data and make sure it's transparent. And that is another way of showing and building trust within your organization. So based on this, based on a lot of the learning that we got from the DWP and private sector customers, we have built an intelligent data platform that allows businesses and organizations to get insight from their data quickly. We do that by building what we call data modules. It goes back to what I was saying about 80% already being done. These data modules are things like customer experience or supply chain optimization, which isn't just manufacturing, but also if you look at workflow within the DWP, it's a similar thing. And then applying your data to these services that are actually quite generic. So we provide these modules that allow people to roll them out quickly, to test and test these and be able to generate empirical evidence that what they're doing with their data is correct, which in effect drives the business into being more data driven. And finally, making sure that what you're delivering is able to integrate with the rest of the infrastructure within an organization and with their customers. That's it from me.
Yeah, it's the cue is for those that are still with us. Yeah, those 70 people. The cue for them to say, okay, it is presentation is done. Is me turning up on a screen. Thank you very, very much, Finbar. It's what you started with. It's really interesting when you said actually before doing data sharing, you need to look after your data. You need to understand where your data is, and you have to provide access to it. And I like the way you define that data chaos. Data chaos is the usual. What is data? How to access it? How is it stored? And the example of the how many rows an Excel spreadsheet has, that is a practical problem that happens in pretty much every single PhD that deals with data and start doing something, around data. You learn how many rows an Excel spreadsheet has, and that, changes over the years, but that doesn't matter. How a ministerial department with such a large network of stakeholders, it needs to put the data situation together to be able to provide better services is at the core of your presentation. And I think that's what it's important to actually understand when we talk about data sharing for AI or developing data spaces that work. What we mean is make data accessible so that it can be dealt with, it can be manipulated, and value can be created around it. Yeah, value means different things for different stakeholders, but there you go. Thank you. And now is our last presentation, 5 minutes, hopefully. And we have a really, really interesting example from outside of the European Union, from someone that has been working on data strategy and on data and digital strategy for a variety of governments and public authorities over the years. Andrew Collins is currently advisor on Smart Dubai. He's been working from the UK for many, many years, and he's got a really interesting experience to tell us about today. He's been at the center of the building and deploying a decentralized data sharing sandbox within this initiative. And please, Andrew, tell us all about it. The floor is yours.
Irene, thank you. And I love that concept of data chaos. I suppose my job is not to create data chaos. So, but also as well, I mean, congratulations on that paper. I think it's, I was reading it last night and it's really neat. And I think from that data wheel that sits at the heart of it, the key concept of trust really is what we are trying to do in Dubai. You cannot have an effectively functioning ecosystem without trust at the center of it, and you can see it here down the left-hand side of my slide. I think an important distinction that I'd like to make at the start is that I have worked in London and Dubai, and those are obviously cities. So this is, to me, an opportunity to create some great sort of open data ecosystems and open data value chain, which creates challenges as well as opportunities. And I'm going to start off with just some fundamentals here, because I think these are just massively important things, and they've been picked up on already by various other speakers. So I'll try to be brief. I think this role of governor for a city data authority to deliver on is really, really important. And in Dubai, this takes various forms. I mean, quite literally down to laws, policies, establishing a really firm set of data classifications. If you have data that is useful and available, then you absolutely need these things. In Dubai, we have a really wide range of open standards as well that are all about, or all across the data lifecycle management. So how do you store data? How do you describe data through metadata? Interestingly, we're starting to think about some standards around data ownership, around how you monetize and commercialize data as well. We also try to be a capacity builder as well. And again, people has been you know, a key word that has been mentioned as other speakers have given their contribution. So that for us is about ensuring compliance with the things that I've just mentioned. It's about carrying out data maturity assessments for public sector organizations so that they are feeding into the ecosystem the starts of proper big data. And also as well, this is about providing training. So one of the things that we've started to do around AI is to provide training to the private sector around making sure that their AI is safe and fair and doing all of the right things. This word convener is not supposed to be a soft word either. This is about having really strong strategies, private sector strategies, in which you will find things like a commitment to exploring decentralized data sharing approaches so that you can start to have a sort of city data market that functions effectively. But as well, and this is a sort of key point of tension that I think I want to, I suppose, as we come to the end of the presentation, finish on, which is about the need to develop use cases. I think Finbar was just mentioning it in the last presentation. This is about the you know, making sure that there is proper value in what we do so that when you do build a market, it actually functions. You've moved me on to the last slide. I, on this, want to highlight around artificial intelligence, which is part of the talk here today as well. Some of the things that we're doing. So on synthetic data, for example, this is not just about making data open. It's about thinking about how you start to deal with some of the privacy issues and how you relate those to making data usable and understanding the trade-off between the two. And what we're aiming to do there is, as well as having you know, a range of data exchange environments, and obviously, you know, being a city like many other cities, having a focus on open data, then what we are trying to do is to make sure that some of those more sensitive forms of data can be brought out into play so that you know, the ecosystem can start to use them. But this is about really a sort of whole systems approach, and this is why, again, we've developed a self-assessment toolkit and training that we provide to government. And I think where I want to sort of start to bring the presentation to a close here is in that sort of red box over on the right-hand side of the slide. I describe as really, and I suppose this counts for lots of cities, Dubai as well as London and many others. We're in a period of experimentation, really, where there has been lots of sort of centralized approaches to data collection and data management and trying to develop ecosystems. We've been trying a decentralized model, but I think we've landed somewhere in the middle, really. You know, we stretched a piece of elastic that has sort of rebounded back on itself a little bit, and sometimes that's what innovation is about. So, you know, we have had, you know, a vision for a sandbox based all around technology convergence and AI and IoT, and the sort of peer-to-peer decentralized data marketplace that can create, in which sensor data, personal data, data for algorithms can be exchanged. And we're trying to, or we've tried to consider that in Dubai in relation to various parameters. So can we exchange that data securely? The answer to that is yes. Can we do so in a way that is privacy preserving? Again, I think the answer to that is yes. Can we do it in an easy manner? And again, I think, you know, we can take friction out of that market in a technical sense. I do actually think that governance is a place where we still have a little bit too much friction. I have a couple more points, one of which is on, can we exchange that data in a way that is fair? And that is where I do sort of start to consider some of those points about ownership of data that we've been discussing, how you account for IP as data gets shared from source to a wider array of market participants. And then also as well, how you around how you define IP as well. I think there's a final point here, which is just about can you do so in a value-giving way? And this is where I think data valorization is really, really important. It's one of those issues that we have battled with for a number of years. I think it's increasingly important for cities who are going to be living within tighter financial constraints in the years to come. The costs of delivering data infrastructure, the costs involved in the pre-processing of data as the requirements of a marketplace around it get increasingly sophisticated, I think are only going to grow. And that, I think, raises almost to the supply side requirements around how you valorize data, on how you put a value on the activities that the public sector creates to get that data out there, and factoring those into bigger business models. That I think is where the tension lies for cities, Irene. I see you have you've reappeared. When I think about decentralized data, I think in sort of some of the more closed value chains that you see in industry, then there it works. I think there's still a convincing job to be done, so that in the more open value chains, in the more open data, in the more open value ecosystems that cities necessarily have to get involved in. I mean, government as a platform is a phrase that has been around for a number of years now. Then there's still work to be done to make sure that decentralized actually works, and that for me revolves around those 2 points: data valorization and ownership of data.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think it's a great close to the different presentations, because you bring us a global perspective on data sharing. You've been very much at the heart of the definition of those policies and their implementation in practice. And I know, and I want to share with the rest of the audience, that you are talking from experience. Yeah, you've been testing this thing, and this point that you make around the decentralization versus centralization. I know you've experimented it practically. Yeah, you've done things around it, and you've been testing different solutions, and how in the end it's a hybrid approach that might be suited to this type of cities. Yeah, that are almost like mini countries or regions. Yeah, with their own with their populations, with their regulations, with their competencies. Yeah, and you bring the point of frictionless data sharing and the point of governance that we haven't discussed before. But governance, it's getting very hot in this data sharing discussion indeed, and it is a very difficult one to get. And governance in the end, yeah, is about getting people together to do things. Yeah, agree on doing things in a certain way and using a number of tools and a number of protocols. I want to invite everybody to turn their cameras on, yeah, and let's have a little bit of a chat all together, because I think that is going to be the most interesting part. So you know that this is the part where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of data sharing in practice. And if you have been following us for the last hour, you will have seen, yeah, different aspects of the good and the bad and the ugly in each individual's presentation. But I want to have a quick round about the good, because when key stakeholder or a public authority or a lab or a company starts doing something with a purpose, yeah, and in theory it's a good purpose. So I would like to ask each of you, what was the good that the initiative that you are here talking us about was set itself to achieve? And let's start with Christina, and let's go around quickly around the virtual table.
Very, very quick. I think that for us, it's really very important to gain critical mass. So to address such a relevant issue, difficult one, and yeah, it's and the initiative that we have in our hands is, as I said, to gain critical mass in our region, but also to connect with other ecosystems, because we need to be aligned to other ecosystems to really be effective in this area.
Mm-hmm. Jana, what about you?
The main goal is to achieve this single data markets and connect different existing islands together. And in order to achieve that, I think we need to have those practical examples and stronger coordination across policy level. Mm-hmm. So there needs to be this common will and resources, prioritizing the use of resources and addressing a bunch of right initiatives, not being too scattered at the European level.
Yeah. Jan-Jos, what about you?
I think in terms of data sharing, we focus on the joint economics of that. So there's your individual position, there's a gain in sharing data and doing things based on that shared data. And what we try to structure the economics and to facilitate the economics behind that. This includes both the sharing and ownership part. So I think that's towards data sharing, that's where our mission, but also our portfolio is at.
Mm-hmm. Finbar?
Yeah, I think there's a real momentum around data sharing and being data driven at the moment. And also actually, especially in the current climate, data is everything. It's pushing, data has been sort of a second-class citizen, both in businesses and organizations for a very long time. It's now pushing that to the fore. There's a lot of work to be done before we get to the point of data sharing, data markets, AI, but that work is being done now.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Andrew?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with Finbar's points. Really, that was mine about the sort of elastic sort of being stretched so far and then rebounding back a bit. And I think this brings me to my recent example of things done well. In Dubai, obviously, like most places, the retail economy is struggling. So being able to bring around the table serious companies involved in payment infrastructure, obviously holding payments data, large players within the retail sector, government departments, being actually quickly being able to organize data governance arrangements that align the motivations and the commercial sensitivities of a different range of organizations so that you can actually start to use data. And again, I make the differentiation between AI and in a strong business intelligence way, I think has been really nice, because that's the thing for me. The big ugly mass of data governance is something that, when required, we manage to push our way through quite quickly.
Mm. It's very interesting. I mean, I was hoping to, this wasn't planned at all. I mean, to the people that are connected on the other side, and we cannot see your faces, but I was expecting that some of you would say something along the lines of, we actually want to build a data-driven products and services for our regions, for our cities, and we have that. We understand that actually providing access to data at scale is something that can promote that artificial intelligence, growth or development. But how far do you think you are from that vision? Yeah, because what we are talking here at the very high level, theoretical level, the good that we are expecting to get at the European level and globally, yeah, it's developing a frictionless data sharing society to develop products that have some good ethical fair artificial intelligence embedded, and you cannot develop those products if the data sharing is not done properly, for lack of a better word. So how far do you think you are from that vision? Yeah, how far from the point of view of the examples that you have put? So for example, Finbar from the ministry, how far do you think the ministry is from that? Or is that not something they are thinking about? They just want to solve all the problems.
Oh, they are definitely thinking about it. And it's two ways of viewing it, right? So if you look at the two ways of tackling that problem, how do you get to that end state? So everybody's looked at that end state. When you look at that end state, that's massive. That's a huge job. So you can tackle that by sitting down and treating it like a project and planning it out over 5 years. We can get started and say, okay, this is where we want to go. What's the first tangible benefit that we can deliver here? is it customer experience? Do we want to deliver a better service to our customer? Let's test that. Let's test the policies around that, the governance, the data stewardship, test that, and then scale that with a vision of getting to that. So they're on the journey, but who knows how long that journey is going to take, because it will change over the years.
Any comments?
Yeah, I mean, just quickly from me, from a city perspective, so I mean, we've tried Decentralized in Dubai, and I think it was it's a really interesting experiment. I think the middle way, which is more about developing a sort of range of data sharing or data exchange interfaces. And I think some of the movement here has to come on the side of of industries. I'll give you the example of Los Angeles and their mobility data sharing scheme, and sort of Uber's objection to that, and I think Transport for London as well, asking Uber to share its data. I think until we can sort of align motivations, to put it politely, from organizations like that, then we will fall a little bit short of having a frictionless, sort of fully open data sharing environment in cities.
Which is probably what take us to the bad. We are talking already about the barriers and the main problems on bringing those ideas into practice. And in your experience, you mentioned some of those, yeah? But in your experience, what are the main barriers that you have found in your regions, in your countries, inside organizations? Quick round. Cristina?
Yes, well, in our case is very understandable, but is the reluctance of private companies in the sharing of data. So for this is so important to build on this concept of trust. And there are few examples, at least in the case of industrial companies, manufacturing companies eager to share data. We have been involved during the last at least 2 or 3 years in an initiative, interregional cooperation initiative, in order to get a platform for the share of data related with wind turbines. So in the Basque country, we have a very powerful and a strong value chain of manufacturers of components of wind turbine components. And these components that are really very added value components, the manufacturers lose the knowledge of what happens with their components in operations once they are sold to the wind turbine OEM. So we are trying to make a collaboration scheme where wind turbine OEMs understand that a better performance of their wind turbines depend on a better performance of their components, and to make the share of data something available for the manufacturers. And we are failing in this exchange of data. So we are really very much, we understand the relevance of this sharing of data and the building trust and building the channels where this trust is built. And we are working with the international data space associations in this sense, understanding that they are providing a standard that could make these owners of data more eager to share them. So for us, this is the big problem. So it's very easy to say, very difficult to get it to a reality.
Yeah, what is your experience in other parts? Jana, for example, you're saying nodding. Yeah.
yeah. I think the biggest problem is in attitudes also, and seeing the value, finding those new data-driven business models, redefining, because companies are kind of used to think in the terms of their own data, and that's already quite okay using analytics, and that's been for a long time. But then capability to imagine that what's beyond your own organization, what you can do with shared data, and also there needs to be more guidelines from the authorities saying what's allowed, because it's there's different interpretation for the permit-based or consent-based data sharing, how you can build agreements, and how you apply to privacy legislation. So I think there needs to be more like common understanding and more like interpretation to create more like secure business environments also. Not too much regulation, but some clearness on how to interpret on the existing regulation.
Well, any more comments? I've got comments, but
I would agree with that. I would say excessive governance created out of the data chaos. And also, to extend what Jana said, it's building that shared data model. And to build that shared data model, you need to have the practical use case to build it around. If you go too wide with that, it becomes too big and it becomes an onerous task.
is that something that we are doing wrong? Like all of us are doing wrong, thinking that we can do this at a scale, kind of like we're going to do it, data sharing frictionless, and then you immediately boom, imagine the world sharing data, or is that or maybe the right approach is just thinking about building data pipelines or things that are very thin and they are global and that have an immediate use because they respond to a problem. And I think that's something that probably you, Finbar, and Jan Jost and Andrew have a specific experience with. What do you think?
Yeah, I was gonna mention that. I think I completely agree. Like, there's a challenge in the willingness and trust to share, and I know, but from other cases, between port and tenants, it's of course like some things are part of the deal, some are not, and I know there are some sensitivities there. We've been working use case specific until now, which makes the data sharing relatively transactional in a very direct way. If you share this, we can do that, and that will save you this. To be honest, even then, trust is involved. We were supporting a very interesting startup, and the only way they could get clients into their decentralized data sharing was to mirror it in their own Excel files, have accountants on it, editing, auditing. So but they took that step to convince their first clients, like this also works. It goes into a system you don't know. But that was even in a very direct transactional case. And thinking through the step from use case specific to give us all you got because we know new solutions must be out there. That's like that's, I think, a conversation we are about to enter. So I cannot talk from experience there, but I know, for instance, around the energy infrastructure in the port, there's like this large organization representing the tenants. They've expressed after a series of interviews, like, yes, a lot of companies are willing or even ambitious in sharing specific data. These yes, these no, in this secure environment. But you also know, like, well, there's not going to be 2 meetings, a scope, and let's develop. But that's like the starting point of a long conversation. And that's and I think that's, yeah, well, that will be the large challenge, and I think that
It will be, definitely. Andrew, what do you think, Andrew?
Well, just from me, yes, I am very much in use case territory at the moment. I think that's where you have, the most concrete, meaningful discussions. In terms of, the 2 words at the center of your slide here, the bad, the thing that I think we need to break through, and I've alluded to this already, is bad monetization. Private sector companies and indeed the public sector saying, we want to monetize our data and here's the price that we put on it. That's a very different proposition from saying, well, actually, here's some data and I know it can deliver value in a use case. Let's work with some partners to define what that end value is, and then we'll work backwards from there to put a suitable price on the data and all of the activities that go into making sure that that data is available.
I get that is it's a topic for another panel. Yeah, data monetization or value generation. We are a few minutes away from the end, but if we have some questions, Tuomo, right? Maybe we can choose a couple of questions.
Yeah. In there, and thank you very much for the great talks, and this is really like educating for us. I think that the BDVA task force now, that the subgroup where we are having quite plenty of material to work on with this what has been discussed, and going forward with I think everybody is having different like perspectives on the mosaic, and it's all the time going around that how do we make something more abstract. And the next question is comes now from the QA is especially for Christina now, that now Christina, about this BDIH now well, it's specifically about the legal form. So what is the legal form of this BDIH as the connected network of assets and technologies? Like, are all partners member of one association, or are the partners connected by on multilateral cooperation agreements, or is BDIH just a brand for the time being? That's the question.
For the time being, and it has this ambition is to be a collaboration agreement. And we have the governance, which is one of the big points of this data will, in this case, is made by a coordination team here in the Basque Business Development Agency, and a consortium agreement with all the members of the DIH. The tricky point of this consortium agreement, well, we have been discussing it, and we have made many, documentation that I would be very happy to share with any entity or any data innovation hub in Europe that wants to benchmark from our governance system, because, well, I wouldn't say it's complex, but it took many time to arrive to a not very complex solution. So it's a consortium agreement, and I would be very happy, as I said, to share the points of this collaboration agreement as a benchmark for rest of DHEs. Thank you for the question.
One quick more question from the audience, Tuomo, because we are at the very end, and I would like to give the floor once more to all the speakers for a very short.
Yeah, in fact, here in the chat there is like more like comments and thanks for the great talks, and also this question that if the material is available somehow other than this video. So that's
yeah, we can make it available. That is something we will discuss with Martina and the colleagues at BDVA. So we have 1 minute, 5 speakers. Do you think you can give a few seconds, last sentence, responding to this very large question? What would you recommend to public authority, to the European Commission, to regional governments, to ports, to large companies that are sharing data? What should be done? Where should they focus their efforts to make a difference? Christina.
Well, Irene, you introduced me as Women in Tech champion, so I owe to this recognition. Thank you very much. It's not that way, but thank you very much. And I really want to say that to public authorities and industrial leaders to take advantage of this untapped pool of women talent. So we cannot forget women in the evolution of data policies and artificial intelligence policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Jana, top that up.
Yeah, that's a very easy to be positive on. But anyway, I think we need to have focus and start with why and purpose, why we are creating these data sharing ecosystems. And one component of defining purpose is to agree on those value creation models. Because data monetization, we've seen in the past that's not really the way. If we want to integrate using AI, using the knowledge we have, we need to focus on value creation and added value from data, from raw data. So that's one of the key topics, and start with a purpose, not with technical tools.
Thank you. And Joost?
I would say maybe overdone, but start thinking, take ownership as a starting point. As you can only share what you own, no matter how open you are. If you don't own it, you cannot consciously decide to share. And it's if you start from that paradigm, as open as you want to be, but I think you face different questions than starting from what do we need. I think that's I would take that quite seriously.
Yeah, thank you. Finbar?
I suppose avoid the bad, avoid getting stuck into long lead time initiatives with no clear outcome. Focus on the good, focus on delivering value and deliver value early and often. And then build trust through the empirical evidence you generate from delivering that value early and often.
Andrew?
I'm going to try to not repeat what others have said. So that leaves me with not very much, because there were some great comments there. I would say that cities still need to concentrate on the basics. So the provision of high quality data into a data ecosystem really matters, and there are many improvements to be made. And you know what? I am going to repeat something that somebody said, and it's what Jan Just was saying. The ownership of data and arriving at a proper definition of that, I think, is something that will help make the ecosystem operate more effectively around value.
Well, thank you so much to all of you, and to all the people that have remained with us, 50 people, for over an hour and a half. And thank you to Omo for the co-chairing and the introduction to the data wheel and the timeline that we believe should be taken into account. And I would like to close saying that we need more spaces for developing imaginative solutions for data sharing. We need experimentation sandboxes to do these things and do them safely. Thank you very, very much. And yeah, let's connect to the next session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the speakers.